customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. If you enjoy what you're learning on the Customer Service Revolution podcast, you'll love our weekly newsletter, The E-Service. It's full of great customer experience tips and stories, includes special offers, webinars, and more each week. To sign up, head to tdg.click/e-service. That's tdg.click/e-service, ESERVICE. Enter your preferred email address, and you can look forward to great advice from John in your inbox every Wednesday.
Welcome back, revolutionaries. Today's guest is Mr. David Rendall, author, leadership expert, speaker, husband, father of 3 amazing girls, ultramarathon and Ironman athlete, and the most notable thing in David's career is he was the highest rated speaker of the 2023 Customer Service Revolution Conference. Welcome, David.
Welcome. I was just showing the picture. You went all out for that high five after you introduced me on stage, and I was showing that to somebody just the other day. I was at TMT, and I know you're friends with the folks at TMT, and I don't know how it came up, but I was giving somebody a high five, and she said something about it, and I was like, check out John. He went Air Jordan.
Yeah,
it was such a good one. Such a good one.
I'm Spud Webb. 5'7", extremely exaggerating and lying.
And 5'7" is your exaggerated height.
Oh, I mean,
wow,
way exaggerating. Okay. I mean, you could fact check that in a heartbeat. And you are 6'7". Well, we've talked about this because we are literally on the opposite end of the spectrum of the height. Like you, fortunate to speak on some big venues, big stages, 1,000, 2,000 people. And I can't tell, I know you've gotten this too on the opposite way. Then I'm done speaking and you can meet John and the exhibition center. He'll sign your book, blah, blah, blah. And I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me in my career. People come up to the booth and ask me, where is he? I'm like, where's who? And I think they're lost. They're like, the guy, the speaker, I'm like, me. And they say, come on. And they, you can't tell from stage how tall or short someone is. And so
without any comparison, right? Unless,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I know you get that when they, because you talk about your height and they,
they say you are really tall in real life. And I was like, well, that was real life also. Well, that was not a hologram.
So if I call you a freak,
yep,
you actually take that as a compliment.
I love it. I mean, when we call people control freaks, when we call them neat freaks, when we call them clean freaks, we're criticizing people, right? That's a negative. We're telling them you're too much, right? You're too neat, you're too clean, you're too controlling. But we just saw the Olympics. It's the start of college football season. If you're an athlete and somebody calls you a freak, they're saying you're unusually gifted and talented.
LeBron James is a freak.
So freak is a term that we use to criticize and to praise. And what I'm trying to do is get people to see that the same quality that people criticize you for is also probably the same quality they praise you for, and that you shouldn't be turning the volume down on those characteristics. You should be turning it up, and you shouldn't be trying to be normal or fit in, or, I call it moderate, reduce, and eliminate. Those are the 3 most common kind of pieces of advice we get about our unique characteristics. And that's what someone's doing when they're calling you a control freak or a neat freak. They're saying, well, moderate it, be less, reduce it, take it way down, or eliminate it. You need to stop doing that altogether. And I'm telling people to turn up the volume, to amplify it. And yeah, in an ideal world, when somebody called you a freak, you'd say, thank you. You know, I've been working really hard at embracing those unique parts of me, and I'm glad that you see it, you know, instead of saying, oh, what am I doing wrong that you think I'm a big weirdo, you know?
And so I think, you're saying lean into more of what you are,
Absolutely.
and stop apologizing
Yeah.
for being unique. And I struggle with that, as a parent, right? Because it's like, I'm trying to prevent my son from, being this that could alienate, and
Yeah.
I don't, I want him to be proud of. So I've known of you forever, just being in the same circle, speaking. You've had a great reputation. Then I got to speak at some conferences with you and just saw the impact, and brought you in last year, and you just crush it. And I loved your speech so well, much that I went and got your book. I got the Freak Factor book on
Yeah.
leadership. And, the first couple chapters is all about, I think, if I have it right, the kids that struggle in school. And so is your
Yeah.
speech. And I really
Yeah.
like that, because I was a kid, I don't know if you were, because you were a professor, and so you schooling probably came easier to you, but requested to repeat every grade from first through eighth. I didn't. My mom, this is in the early 70s, wouldn't, because it'd be embarrassing. And I look back I mean, I was ADD, LD, they didn't know how to handle it. I look back, and I think it was a good decision that she didn't, only because you could have held me back 3 years, and I wouldn't have been any smarter. That wouldn't have stopped me from pulling on Susie's pigtails and spitballs and all those things. So that wouldn't have
Yeah.
helped.
Third grade material isn't so high level that you just needed more time to get it. It's the fundamental building blocks, right? I can't pay attention to it, or
Right.
I'm not even focused on it. Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
people ask me if school failed me or I failed school, I don't know. I mean, it's in the 70s. Maybe it'd be different today. But so talk a little bit about
Well, I
that.
think that is a failure of school. I mean, when I speak to teachers, and I do a lot, when I speak to administrators, and I do a lot, when I speak to educators, and I do a lot, I tell them all education needs to be special education. I started my career helping kids with disabilities to get job opportunities. And we tell we'll do some special education for some people, and for the rest of the people, we're like, if you don't want what we've got, then it's like you said, it's your problem. You failed school, we didn't fail you, right? And I think the mistake there is there's no normal kids. The kids who are smarter academically need a different kind of a challenge. The kids who are struggling academically need a different kind of support. Some people just need a different curriculum altogether. Why are you even trying to teach them stuff that isn't working? I've been able to speak. One was called the Joy School down in I think it was down in Houston, and they're a school for kids with learning differences, and they call it learning differences. And all they do is they bring them in, they work with them for a few years, and they send them back to the schools. And so I'm like, okay, well, how do you teach a kid with dyslexia to read well enough to go back to regular school? How do you teach a kid with, that can't do math, and has a learning disability as it relates to math? How do you teach them well enough that they can go back? And I was expecting they got some weird program or system, or and they go, it's mostly acceptance. We just help the kids understand this is how you are, this is how you learn, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if this is how you learn, then here's how to get through things, and here's how to match your abilities to the situation. And geez, is that so hard? And yet it is, because we want to. I tell people we're bad predictors. We want to predict, and they would have been so wrong about you, and they were so wrong about me, and we're so wrong about so many people. John isn't going to do well, because if you fail school, you fail life. That's what people think. School is a predictor of life success. And if you can't do this, and that's the fear. That's why parents have that fear. Teachers have that fear. If you can't do this, you won't be able to do that. If you can't do first grade, you can't do second grade. If you can't do third grade, you can't do fourth grade. If you can't get into college, you can't get a good job. You can't get a good job, you can't make money. You're going to be living in your parents' basement for the rest of your life. And meanwhile, you're a very successful business owner. You've written multiple books.
And that's what I mean. Why
We're
do so many
terrible
of these
predictors.
kids become the outliers, successful outliers? Why is that?
It's because they have strengths that school isn't measuring, and they have weaknesses that school does, right? So school cares about reading and writing and math. And when you don't do that well, the belief is then you're not a good fit for the rest of life,
Right.
the work world. And if you can do those things, the prediction is you're going to do great. And so no one's saying, well, it's like at work that what gets measured is what gets done. Well, at school, what's measured is what matters. And so when that's what you're measuring, I always say, if someone's doing great in art class, nobody cares. If you're doing bad in English, math, and science, nobody cares if you're crushing it in gym. Nobody cares if you're crushing it in band. In fact, we make people academically ineligible for sports where they might have some future if they can't do the work well enough, even when sports doesn't require you to have a lot of those abilities. And oftentimes it gives people an outlet when they have some kind of physical or kinesiological ability that isn't represented by school. So I think part of it is we have a very narrow view of success. And so when kids don't fit into that very narrow view, again, we don't try to help them succeed. We assume they can't. And we're basically seeing as weeding them out, right? And so that's why I talk about how those things that look like weaknesses might also be strengths. And in fact, one of the examples, which I didn't know you would have liked as much because I didn't know your story, is about so many people with dyslexia who are billionaires, Richard Branson and Paul Orfalea and Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of IKEA. And so, they don't have broken brains. It's a different brain. And the same thing that causes them to struggle in school causes them to succeed in real life at a higher level than most of the rest of us will. And so that's what I'm trying to help people do, is see that the weakness always has a strength, that the inability is always connected to an ability, that the disadvantage is connected to an advantage, that the valley is connected to a peak. And very rarely do we see that in school. We just see the disadvantage. We just see the valley. We just see the weakness. And that's why my life's mission is to help people see the other side of the story, because what they want to do is throw out your example because, that's just the exception. Well, guess what? We have a word called exceptional, and it means amazing, fantastic, and wonderful. So yeah, it is the exception. And what I want to show people is everyone is exceptional that way. I mean, I was just recording a podcast episode earlier today, and I'm preparing for, you mentioned my Ironmans and stuff, my first Ironman in a while, because COVID obviously stopped the triathlons and things like that for a while. And it's taken me a while to get back to it. And I was watching some Ironman inspiration videos, and the 2022 World Championship came up, and Chris Nikic, who was the first person with Down syndrome to ever finish an Ironman, just did in 2022, he did the Ironman World Championship, which he was the first person with Down syndrome to do that. And so, I mean, we predict we have such low predictions for people with Down syndrome that you can find out you're having a kid with Down syndrome before they're even born. And a lot of people terminate that pregnancy. Yeah. We just go, oh, well, somebody like that isn't going to be able to make it in the real world. Meanwhile, Chris Nikic is a multiple Ironman and is a motivational speaker. But when his mom's pregnant and she was sharing part of the story, the advice basically is like, do you really want to do this? You don't have to. You can just end this and then get a normal one.
Right.
And so we don't value different. That's, again, the freak. We don't value unusual. And again, when we measure things based on intelligence, based on ability, based on normality, when you're not intelligent, you're not normal, then we say, oh, you can't be valuable. And Chris breaks that stereotype. And so I'm always sharing stories like that to help people see that we have a narrow version of success, a narrow version of goodness. And we usually define it like normal, and that's a mistake. And, so I just keep gathering those stories. And now I've got yours that I can add to, all the rest of them, because you're not just a little bit successful. I mean, when you look at what percentage of people are going to own a business, what percentage of people are going to write a book, what percentage of people are going to own a business that actually works, what percentage of people are going to make the amount of money. I mean, you're in the top 1, 2, 3, 4% of everybody. And yet you talk to your teachers and they weren't even sure they should let you go to the next grade. They certainly weren't predicting future success for you. So I'm trying to show people that's a mistake, by very specifically showing that what you didn't have was specifically matched by a bunch of other stuff that you do have. Unfortunately, we don't see it, we don't measure it, we don't monitor it, we don't look for it, and then we don't value it. And so it goes unnoticed oftentimes by the very person, and people don't end up as successful as you, because when you get told your whole life you're not going to be successful, some people stop trying. They basically believe what they're being told and they go, well, I guess I'm not going to make it. That's disappointing. And they live down to the expectations.
No
that
one
everybody has
rises
for
to
them.
low expectations.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. My mom was taking me to all these, you know, specialists, you know, trying to prove the school wrong. And she took me to this one psychiatrist, I have no idea what it was. I think it was in 4th or 5th grade. And, you know, let's say we have an hour appointment. I sit down, she's waiting in the lobby, and he has a baseball card of Roberto Clemente. And, you know, I start rattling off statistics, and he was kind of surprised. Obviously, like Roberto Clemente. So he pulls a card and he goes, what do you do in 67? Boom, boom, boom. That's the year he won the MVP. And, you know, I had everything. He goes, what about 68? Boom, boom, boom. He gets up, says, you know, it's over. You know, my mom's like, that was 5 minutes. Yeah. And he said, listen, all school is, at least in the 70s, grade school, is memorization. He has no problem with memorization. His problem is he memorizes what he enjoys, and that's a different issue. But he's bright. Like, you know, I've never, you know, Roberto Clemente is my favorite player, the doctor said, and I don't know a tenth of what your son knows. And I get the feeling that he knows the whole, you know, the whole league, which was true. But, I couldn't, you know, tell you at the time what 7 times 7 was, which is memorization.
Well, so there's a good, did school fail you or did you fail school? So one of the things that happens, for example, with people with autism is they almost always have what's called a special interest area. So for you, it's baseball. I'm not saying you had autism, but people with autism oftentimes have a special interest area. And when they do, they want to obsess over that particular thing. Well, then what we do in education, oftentimes we try to stop them from obsessing with that thing. And what I teach people is, what if you used that thing to teach all the other things? So if someone's obsessed with baseball, let's focus on math with baseball. Let's focus on articles about baseball. Let's focus on the history of baseball. I mean, baseball covers civil rights. Baseball goes back to around the Civil War times. Baseball has a history of where it came from probably maybe some kind of Native American sport or something. And so that's where school fails. Instead of somebody saying, I can get through to John if you give me the chance, because I'm going to take what John can do and I'm going to try to build on it, versus I'm going to keep measuring John against the same standard. And as he keeps failing, I'm going to keep hammering him and try to get him, force him to want to do what I want him to do, because that's what good people do. That's what smart people do. That's what valuable people do. Or, and this is the big lie, that's what the real world demands. So I don't adapt my education to John. I try to force John to adapt to my education, because I think John's going to have to adapt to the quote unquote real world when he gets older. And what you've done is continue to do that. I mean, you talked about videos and stuff like that. I mean, there's the classic one, you know, I don't have an attention problem. You have an interesting problem.
Right.
You know, the reason I was the highest ranked speaker at your conference is because when I walk on stage, my assumption is nobody cares. And everybody is holding in their hand or has in their pocket a phone that will show them the entire internet, every text from their spouse or partner, messages from their children, social media, every game score that they're interested in.
As an attendee,
yeah,
you know, I'm giving you 30 to 90 seconds, and then you know, I am walking outside, I'm returning emails, I am, you know, I'm judging you, and you obviously know this, you know, you got to capture it and say, oh, now you've bought another 2-3 minutes of my time because you were a little off the hook there with that icebreaker. And then all of a sudden, now you have me in the palm of your hand, which you do so well.
Well, And I think you're generous with 30 seconds, because what I used to tell people is you have a very limited time to get people's attention. What I tell them now is they don't even start with attention. People start looking at their phones and they wait for some kind of cue to tune in. The reason I walk on stage and say the first thing people want to know about me is how tall are you? I'm 6'6", but I'm 6'9" in heels, is because when people laugh at that, the people still holding their phones go, oh,
What I
like
miss?
to laugh.
Wait a minute, what I miss?
Yeah, I might as well be throwing out candy bars. I like candy bars. Well, you can't catch a candy bar if you're not watching. You can't laugh if you're not listening.
Have you ever noticed that you can walk into Starbucks in any city, in any country, and your experience will be the same? Doesn't matter if the barista speaks English, French, Hebrew, or Polish, you'll have the same experience and your drink will be consistent as well. Or how about Chick-fil-A? It isn't just one store where they're based in Atlanta that says, my pleasure. It's every location. If you think for a moment about the places you like to frequent, those who you love to do business with, I bet they have a consistent experience as well. It's not dependent on what time of day you go there, who you deal with, or what you're going there to buy. Is Disney better on a Monday than a Thursday? Of course not. Monday's Cinderella is going to give you the same experience as Thursday's Cinderella. So how do they do it? How do they deliver a consistent world-class experience? Well, it's all about exceptional journey maps that they've built for both their customers and employees. And you can do it too. The DiJulius Group has consulted with hundreds of companies to develop their own unique brand experience using journey mapping. Did you know that consumers will pay more to purchase from a company with a reputation for great customer service? That means even if you offer better products than your competitors, you're losing revenue if their service is better. So if you're struggling with lack of standards, customer complaints, unengaged employees, or scaling your business, and you don't have the resources for consulting this quarter, then you need to register for our upcoming live stream workshops, where your team will have the opportunity to work with John DiJulius himself and our VP of Consulting, Dave Murray, to create your own journey maps. The workshops take place from noon to 3 Eastern Time on October 28th and November 4th. Visit thedijuliusgroup.com/live stream now to register. That's thedijuliusgroup.com/live stream. We can't wait to guide you in creating your own signature brand experience. See you in class.
And so imagine though, John, so let's pretend that your conference, we treated it like school. I get up there, I bore the heck out of everyone. Nobody pays attention. Half the people leave. People give terrible ratings. Nobody knows what I talked about. And then you tell me all that and I go, you got bad attendees, John.
Yeah, it's their fault.
You got bad attendees.
Yeah.
And until they get better, I won't be back.
Right.
You would think that's absolutely ludicrous. And then somehow the school system gets away with that though. Hey, kids don't like it. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody's interested, but let's give them some medicine to help them do it. Let's force them to do it. Let's threaten them if they don't do it. Let's ostracize them if they don't do it. So it's a big problem that we think that it doesn't have to be interesting. It doesn't have to connect. It doesn't have to be meaningful. It doesn't have to be valuable. And again, like you said, I know from the other side. So yes, I didn't struggle academically at school, but I also did some, like I got a D in honors English on my senior year because it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't like it. I didn't want to learn it. And maybe if I would have tried really hard, but I didn't, right? But yes, I was on the other side too. And I was a professor. And so it was my job to get people's attention. Again, it wasn't my job to go, well, you'll fail if you don't. It was my job, I thought, to teach them, not to decide if they were willing to learn or not, right? And so I tried to make my classes valuable. I didn't say, turn to chapter 14 on motivation. I said, who's somebody you want to motivate? What do you want to motivate them to do? What have you been trying that hasn't been working? And now let's help you solve that problem in class, right? Now everybody's interested because you're helping them get their kid to clean up their room. They're getting the HR lady to process their paperwork. They're getting their husband to start making his own lunch in the mornings, right? You're solving people's problems through education instead of saying, I don't know. You just have to be here tonight, and we're going to talk about chapter 7, whether you're interested or not, right? So I do think that is a failure of education, and it's a failure of just communication in general. We overestimate people's interest, or we think somehow it's on them if they're not interested, instead of it's our job to capture their attention. And that's another part of being a freak is, are you willing to, you know, do some slides that are different from what everybody else is doing? Are you willing to communicate in a way that's different from what everybody else is doing? And a lot of people aren't. And that's what's made me a successful speaker, because people go, I don't know, my boss at the company gets away with boring presentations that aren't, that nobody cares about and people fall asleep during. So I guess when I give a presentation, I could just throw up some bullets and I don't have to do anything to get anybody's attention either. And then people do it at conferences and somehow get away with it. And so that's the reason I get high marks, and it's the reason I get asked to come back, is because for whatever reason, people aren't willing to do anything different than what they see other people doing.
All right, let's pivot this to how this applies to leadership, because everyone listening is a leader, and just as importantly, because I love how it applies to parenting, right? Because we can blame school all we want. And one of the benefits of social media is following you and seeing your 3 girls and how proud you are of them. So either one, and they're probably one and the same. But all right, I'll ask you, what are the 4 factors of effective leadership? Which is the title of your first book, correct?
Yeah. Okay. I think before we get into that, I think the leadership and the parenting one, they do go together. So let's talk about that.
Because I'm the father of 3 boys.
Yeah.
Maybe we can introduce them. I think mine are much older.
Yeah. Hey, I don't know. Maybe there's nothing wrong with that. I think I would tell leaders the same thing that I tell parents, which is that, and it was just, it's the same thing I tell teachers. It's your job to discover the unique characteristics of the people you lead, of the people you parent, of the people you teach, and use that knowledge to connect with that person on an individual level. All education should be special education. Your parenting should be customized to each person. And as you lead people in organizations, it should be customized. Some people need a lot of details, and you need to provide those details instead of telling them they need to be more big picture. Some people need to see the big picture, and instead of telling them they shouldn't worry about that and just to focus on the details, you need to help them connect with the big picture. And so what I tell people is you need to give people permission to be, and not just permission, but that's where it starts. Because if you won't give people permission to be themselves, you're certainly not going to encourage them to be themselves. But people for at least to know it's going to be safe. So for my daughters, a simple example, and it goes back to education.
Yeah, I wanted you to give me an example of your daughters without, giving oversharing for them. But this is totally selfish from being a parent of, I want to learn.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm the proudest of, because people, it's easy to criticize education.
Right.
What did you do? And what I did, and this is something I'm very proud of, is I have 3 daughters and they went to 3 different high schools. Right. And all that we paid for, and they went to different schools because they're different people and they had different needs. And so we matched the school to the person. We didn't try to force the person to conform to the school. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So my oldest daughter went to a religious school, K through 12. She liked it just fine. When she got to high school, she had her friends. She was happy with it. She liked the system. She enjoys education. She didn't have problems with stuff. She kept going. She wanted to stay. Right? My second daughter was involved in gymnastics starting in like 5th or 6th grade. She did it 16 to 20 hours a week. She did it in the evenings after school. She'd get home at 8:30 after practice. She'd take a shower. She'd be eating dinner at 9 o'clock, working on her homework at 9:30, had to get up at 6 in the morning to do her, schoolwork. She's also a very introverted person. She's also very meticulous and very organized and very motivated. And at some point she says, hey, can I do homeschool? And I'm like, well, I don't have any way to homeschool you, and your mom isn't an educator. Like, what do you mean? And we kind of let it sit for a little while. And then, she found this online high school program through a university where you could even get a 2-year college degree as part of your high school diploma. and they did all the grading and they did all the assignments, right? It was you were getting schooled at home, but it wasn't putting it on us as parents to do it. And what I told my wife, and this goes back to Freak from the beginning, is why can't she have an unconventional school experience if I have an unconventional work experience, right? You didn't have a normal school experience and you don't have a normal work experience. So why should I expect my kids to do the same? And so we gave her that opportunity starting in 9th grade. She absolutely thrived. It was perfect for her. She could wake up later. She could work her own schedule. She could figure out how to organize her time. She could do more math on one day, more English. She could push them together. She could spread them apart. And that was a very successful thing for her. We'd already had her skip 1st grade for some other reasons. So she was already in somewhat of an unconventional situation. And again, the school was like, oh, what about social development? And what if she's shorter than the other kids and they'll have their driver's license before her? I'm like, none of this sounds like education to me. And then the last one, when she got to high school, we put her in a college prep school, mostly because she's very driven by friendships and relationships. And some of her higher performing friends had gone to a different school, and the people that she was with were a real negative influence. And we knew that was going to have a negative influence on her. So I have 3 girls. They went to 3 different schools because I think my job as a leader and as a parent is to help them create a life that fits them, not for them to constantly be smashed in the face by a life that doesn't, because I think that's possible. It's possible to start your own business. It's possible to find a unique career. It's possible to have unique educational experiences. I mean, we have a school of engineering here. We have some other kind of unique charter school. There's so many opportunities. We're about an hour outside of Raleigh, so we don't have as many opportunities as they would have in a larger city. But there are things out there, and even online, that's available for everybody. So that's an example. You know, somebody, I'm working with a company right now with my Freak Factor assessment, with my Amplify assessment. And the whole goal is, can you give your people more of what fits their unique defining features? And are you willing to give them permission to do less of what doesn't fit? In other words, are you willing to match the job to the person instead of constantly pushing the person into job requirements that you can tell do not fit that person, right? And you've seen this. I mean, in your service stuff, you've met somebody who's been a customer service person since they were 7 years old. And you've met somebody else who's been to all the training and they'll never be good at customer service. It's stuff you can teach people to get better at, but you don't turn somebody into a caring, empathic.
All the training in the world, if you don't naturally or wherever it came from, love people, if you don't love people, 10,000 hours of training isn't going to change that.
Right.
You need to, listen, doesn't mean you're wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe you're in a cubicle that doesn't interact, data.
Right, that's not the job for them if you don't have that. But so that's one of the lies too, is that we think people are way more malleable than they are. I'll turn you into a salesperson. That's no more feasible than turning somebody into a great customer service person. I'll turn you into an accountant. No, you want, I can teach you the skills, but I can't make you the best at it. You have to have a certain amount of natural instinct, natural drive, natural inclination. And so I think that's our job as leaders, is to find that natural inclination. You said a little bit about it when we were starting, like, what's the difference between, one of my favorite quotes is from Pavarotti, who's a famous opera singer. And he said, people praise me all the time for my discipline. He said, it's not discipline, it's devotion. So when you love it, when you're passionate about it, when you care about it, then you can add the training on top of that and you can become world-class, right?
Well, Dave, I could tell you all day, my goal, I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to, do this. I'm going to lose 25 pounds. Don't tell me your goals. Yeah. Show me your habits.
Yeah.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, because you're definitely, in this area, the expert, but, goals and motivation are fleeting, but it's 6 a.m. tomorrow morning when I'm supposed to get up for my training. There's no goals and motivation then. I better have discipline and habits and a system, am I correct?
Yes. Well, I would take it one step behind that, though, is that, so like you said earlier, I do Ironmans, I do ultramarathons, and I'm going to Ironman, Wisconsin in 5 days. So what works for me, and I think this is what more people should be doing, is I think the systems and the processes need to match the person, your identity. So in other words, discipline doesn't get me out the door to do a run. It doesn't get me out the door to do a bike ride. It doesn't get me out the door to do a swim. What gets me out the door to do a run, bike, or swim is I'm a hyperactive person who wants to be outside, who wants to be moving, who wants to accomplish big goals, who wants to be moving forward, who wants to be fit, who wants to take on a challenge. Ironman, it's like a job. Ironman fits me. Does that make sense? Meanwhile, I've got an invoice I need to send for the last 3 weeks and I haven't sent it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I had a lady in my class one time when I was teaching graduate
That's
school.
invoices from us. Take your time.
I had a lady in my class one time. Well, I think when we did the customer service revolution, I think your people emailed me a few times. Hey, Dave, we need those travel expenses.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, are you going to send us Dave, we would love to cut you a check. What you need to do is tell us how much the check. Dave, we're trying to close this out. So, I mean, that's a legitimate story. But there was a lady in one of my classes and we were talking about goal setting and she said she needs to run more, but she made it really clear she hates run.
Yeah. Maybe not run.
Earlier in the class. So what some people say is just tough it out, stick it up habits.
Yeah.
I think we overestimate motivation and goals. To your point, you can set goals all day long. We also overestimate discipline though. I think self-control is a limited thing that we have. And if we use too much of it in one area, we don't have any of it left over in another area. So for example, if your job's sucking the life out of you, you're probably not living really healthy habits.
Right.
But if you got a job that fits, you got a little leftover time and energy at the end of the day. You're not exhausted and miserable to maybe go do something else. But this lady thought she should run because that's healthy. But I learned that she was passionate about some kind of Chicago style tap dance or something. It was a specific kind of tap dance. I said, tap dancing is really hard, right? It takes a lot of energy.
Burns as much as, if not more.
Right. I said, so wouldn't you be more likely, to your point, to have a system and a habit and a process that worked to help you get fitter if it was linked to something you genuinely enjoy than if it's linked to something you absolutely hate, right? So I do think that sooner or later, the stuff that happens long-term, the reason I haven't just done one Ironman, I've done 7. The reason I haven't just done one ultramarathon, I've done tons of them. The reason, because you can't get ready for that race in a week, in a month. It has to be years and years of nonstop training. It's because I want to go on that trail run. I want to get on the stationary bike. I want to go to the pool because I genuinely enjoy being in motion. Because sooner or later, to your point, and then I'll get this is only so motivating if you don't enjoy the process. It's going to feel good when I cross that finish line, hopefully on Sunday, but it doesn't feel good enough to train for month after month after. If every one of those days sucks, every one of those workouts sucks, every one of those activities, why are you doing it then? Right? To do months and years of activity for one moment of, oh, that felt good. I can find better ways to get that high, right? So I think you need to genuinely enjoy that process. I genuinely enjoy speaking. So that's easy to keep up the discipline of, the reason I started my own podcast is because I'd rather talk to the camera for an hour than sit down and write for an hour. And so now I'm working out new material and working out new things to speak about and working out new concepts and talking about things that I otherwise wouldn't have an outlet for. I mean, just earlier today, I was talking about a guy that I talk about in my speeches, Matt Stutzman, who just won a gold medal in the Paralympics, doing a follow-up story in this kid called Doodle Boy, who a teacher told him to stop doodling. And another teacher gave him an Instagram account, and he's become super famous and successful and done stuff for the royal family and done collaborations with Nike. And now he's doing something big with Marks and Spencer, which is a big retailer over in the UK. So, and then people are sending me stories and examples of company weaknesses that are also strengths, people's examples of weaknesses that are strengths. And so I'm more consistent with the podcast than I ever was with writing because it's a better fit for who I am. James Clear talks about that in Atomic Habits, is sort of making sure your goals match your identity, right? And I think really what comes down to it, at some point, I'm not a more disciplined person, just like I said with Pavarotti, than some other people. I just genuinely want to be active, and I genuinely like to be outside, and I genuinely like to be in motion, and I'm genuinely looking forward to doing the race. I don't see it as some sort of punishment that I have to endure if I want to be healthy. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. We are talking to Dave Rendall, author, leadership expert, speaker, podcaster. And your 4 books, Dave, I want to make
Yeah.
sure I get them right. The 4 factors of effective leadership, the freak factor, the freak factor for kids, and the pink goldfish 2.0.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Well, that's this concept, this freak factor concept, just for companies instead of people, right? So what we learned is that companies have weaknesses that are also strengths, and that the things that make companies successful are exactly the reasons why some people don't like them. A great example of this recently that I just talked about on my other podcast was Nebraska was 50th in all the states of the United States in tourism, and their slogan was "Visit Nebraska, visit nice." And the problem is Nebraska is right next to Colorado, 14,000-foot peaks, raging whitewater rapids. I mean, Colorado's an outdoor wonderland.
Yeah, yeah.
And Nebraska is a bunch of flat cornfields. So they changed their slogan to honestly, Nebraska, honestly, it's not for everyone. And interest went way up. I mean, late night shows were talking about them. It got people's attention. They did advertisements like, lucky for you, there's nothing to do here. Because what do some people want to do on vacation? They want to do nothing. They don't want to climb a 14,000-foot peak. They don't want to go down a raging whitewater rapid. And so that's an example of a place that focused on, acknowledged their weaknesses. We're not for everyone. We don't have everything. Everyone doesn't love it. You might not, but you might. And here's what we do have instead of here's what we don't have. So we do that with organizations. People go to Target and they pay a little bit more to have a better experience. They go to Walmart to save money, but they don't value their psychological and emotional well-being, right? They make a trade-off, right? They make a trade-off. Nobody goes to Walmart expecting good customer service. You teach customer service, but Walmart isn't trying to provide good customer service. They're trying to provide the lowest possible prices by sacrificing and eliminating customer service, which then opens up an opportunity for someone else to get paid for providing that customer service. So that's what Pink Goldfish is lots of examples and stories of companies who've done unique things to separate themselves from the competition. But the problem with doing unique things is that it causes resistance. And so people are afraid to do it because anything that's innovative is going to look wrong compared to the industry standards at the time. So Nebraska, that's what I just talked about on my podcast. After 5 years, they just pulled the honestly, it's not for everyone slogan, even though it was working great. And they improved from 50th to 41st. They got 100% more interest, literally 100% interest doubled in Nebraska based on their measurements, because some people are like, I don't like it. And it makes Nebraska sound like it's not a good place. And so anytime you try to do this personally, you're going to get called a freak and people are going to criticize you and tell you to turn the volume down. When you try to do this organizationally, the problem with trying to be innovative, the problem with trying to differentiate, I mean, you do so many amazing things. And I talked about it when I was on stage at your conference, and you practice what you preach, and you got me those awesome shoes. And I think they're, oh, look, got them right here. You got me those awesome Saucony shoes, and they're these amazing race shoes, and they're pink, and they're all these things. You practice what you preach. And then I said it when you spoke at TMT. You give all these amazing examples of stuff you do to make your company better for people, and people listen and go, that sounds like a lot of work, or that sounds like a lot of time, but a lot of companies don't do that, and their people still work, right? Do I have to do all that? How much would that cost? And so they don't do it. And so the big problem with everybody knows they're supposed to differentiate their company, but if you're going to differentiate, it's going to look like a mistake. It's going to look like a weakness. It's going to look like a problem, and you're going to get criticism from somewhere. And if you think that all criticism is bad and you should avoid it, you're just going to end up average, mediocre, and invisible. And so that's what we talk about in Pink Goldfish, is how to stay away from average, mediocre, and invisible, which is where most companies end up.
So here's my epiphany. Tell me how, if I have it correct, but it's, everyone has the potential to be a freak at something. Yep. And I believe, freak equals your superpower.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you said it too. I think it's not even like has the potential to be. I think everybody already is a freak in a positive way. They have this unique weakness strength combination. The problem is they've been taught to hide it. They've been taught to push it down. Right. They've been taught to hold it in. They've been taught to reduce it, moderate it, and eliminate it. And so what I try to tell people is, I'm not telling you to try to be weird. I'm telling you, you already are. You just need to embrace it, right?
Listen, my biggest learning disability was I spoke too much in class. You couldn't get me to stop talking. I got kicked out, sent to the principal's office. But today, what do I do for a living? I'm a professional speaker.
Yeah, I mean, that's my story, right? I mean, we have the same story. As I got in trouble for talking too much. Now I get paid to talk. And that's how I learned, like, people like, where did you come up with this? That's where I learned it. I was like, wait a second, I'm getting paid to do the very thing. I mean, my parents called me Motormouth. I mean, I'm getting paid to do the thing that people spent their whole life trying to stop me from doing. And you're not just speaking on stage, you're doing like me. You have a podcast that you're talking with other people. And so again, why wasn't school able to see that? Why aren't parents able to see that? Why aren't employers able to see that? And that's what I'm on a mission to do, is help them to be able to see it. Because once you tell people, they go, oh, that makes sense. And then they can see it. It's the opposite of what we get taught most of the time.
Dave, how can our listeners get more of Dave Rendall? Where can they go for your podcast? Where can they go for your books? All your great stuff.
Yeah. The podcast is called The Imperfectionist Podcast, and it's on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. So you can find it just by searching The Imperfectionist.
Also, this will be in the show notes. The Imperfectionist Podcast.
Yep. The Imperfectionist Podcast. That's on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. The best way to get any of my stuff is just go to drendall.com, DRENDALL.com. Even if you
books
just Google
are there.
David Rendall. Yeah, the books, there's short videos, links to all my social media, and I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's easy to find me. If you Google David Rendall, it'll almost all be me, except it thinks that I'm also the David Rendall who was an opera singer in England, who's 70 years old, and was born in the 1940s. So it has all my information correct, except somehow it thinks I was an opera singer who was born in the 1940s.
Hey, that might work for you. Maybe people hire you to sing. Dave, listen, I've really enjoyed following you, working with you. I love your content, but most of all, you're a good human being. I love, how proud you are of your family, and I enjoy, seeing that through our socials and just getting to know you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm loving all the quotes from your new book. I seem to be reposting pretty much all of them. Like, there's another gold one. There's another gold one. So I'm loving it.
All right. Thank you, Revolutionaries. We'll be right back after this.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. Did you enjoy this episode? Consider leaving us a review. We value your feedback and love to hear how you're using the podcast in your organization. To hear more, be sure to subscribe now on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.